How you going, guys? It's the Board Game Bully and we're back with another board game review. And just before we jump into it, if you see me doing any wincing or anything like that, it's not that I hate the game that we're talking about today, it's just that I have had an emergency appendectomy on Monday and I'm not supposed to be lifting more than 5 kilos for 6 weeks. Yeah, good luck with that. These need lifting. 6 weeks, I give you 6 minutes. But the game we're reviewing today might actually weigh more than 5 kilograms, and that's Scythe. So Scythe is a game that I've had on my shelf for a long time, and I'll be honest, it's intimidated me. You know, you look at the back, and you're like, oh man, there's going to be so many rules. And yeah, I just kept putting it off and putting it off. Someone else in the group had their own copy, wanted to play it, so we played it last weekend, and let's see if I was right in my, intimidation of it or not. Let's go have a look at the rules and components. So here we have the board somewhat set up in front of us for Scythe. Here you have your encounter cards. Now, encounter cards will be got if you move your special player unit to, let me just get the special player unit out. This game has actually not been played. This copy, this is my copy, has not been played. Everything is still in the box. So you can see me basically do it in real time. Look, there's the droopy sword I was talking about. Is it gonna let us have a closer look, maybe? There, see, look at that. Little droopy sword, or is it a gun? Oh, it's a droopy gun. I thought it was a droopy sword. So, these spots right here where I'm pointing at, they have a little star blast. There's 2 of them right beside each other here. If your character goes there, you get to look at the top one of these encounter cards, and it will give you an option. Now, some of the options are good, some of the options are bad. Give the newly recruited soldier a lift to his assignment, gain 2 money and 1 popularity. Then there's another option that lets you pay 2 money to gain a worker and 2 resources. And then the last one is generally if you want to be a dick, you can pay 2 popularity to build 1 structure. Now, there are 11 of those spaces on the board. Getting to them early can definitely give you some good advantages. These cards here are handed out on setup. These are your secret objectives. Everyone will get 2 on setup. So they tell you what you can do. Have 8 or more combat cards in hand and at least 1 combat victory star. So if you do both of those, you can flip that over and that lets you get 1/6 closer to ending the game. Now, these cards over here, they are the factory cards. There will be 1 more factory card than there are players at the game. And the factory space is this space in the middle. The first person to get there gets to come and they get to choose which factory card they would like. Factory cards go on the edge of your player board and they give you additional space, an additional space that you can use. So normally there are 4 different spaces you can use. Once you have this, you will be able to go to 5 different spaces. And the last deck of cards are the combat cards. So combat in this game, with however many plastic units you have associated with a combat, you can secretly add 1 combat card to your combat. That one there, you can see it'll give you an additional 2 combat. So, when we're talking about cards during setup, you now know what all the cards are, so let's get into what setup looks like. You will have a faction, and you will have an action board. And some of the factions don't go with some of the action boards. They are detailed in the rules. So, here the faction card is at top. Now, the faction card gives you some of your information about what you start with. But so does your player board. So, I start with 5 power. So your power track is down here to the right, just a little off screen. Right there, that's your power track there. So I start with 5. Power can be used as a resource to pay for things. It's also how you win battles. So when you go into a battle with someone else, you assign a certain amount of power, up to 7. And then, whoever has the most power after cards are played is the winner. It also tells you how many combat cards you're going to start with. And you can see this faction starts with no combat cards. Then you look at your player board here. So all of the spots, all of the green spots on the player board, so not all the green spots, I should say all of the top spots end up getting covered by your tokens. Now these tokens, there are many of them, and they will give you more resources throughout the game as you unlock them. So let's have a look here. Also some of the stuff down the bottom will get covered up. So your first little, you've got this, your little pawn. Now your little pawn is just used to pick which action space you'll be using. The rules of Scythe are you can't use the same action space twice, so you always have to be moving back and forth. Then you have this little heart, and that, I'll just put it down, that goes on your popularity track. Now your player board here gives you where you should be starting on that, and I should be starting on 2. So people don't like me all that much, and you can see my heart is now on 2 on the popularity track. Very, very big board. Then we've got this little Crabman. Our Crabman is our power tracker, so it goes on 5. We've already discussed that. Then we have these 3 here. Now these are your recruit options. So they go in these spots down here. And we can take a certain action on the board and pay certain resources to take them off. And when we take them off, we move them up to this board here and immediately get the reward, be it 2 additional power, 2 additional coins. Coins are how you win the game. 2 additional popularity, or 2 additional combat cards. We would also get the improved benefit on our bottom action of whatever has been covered. Then we go to our structures. Now again, this will all have a slightly different setup for every player. So our mine goes here. When we take our mine off the board using the build action, we can use this mine here to transport our troops from our mine to any of these mine spaces out on the board. Now, those mine spaces can also be used to travel to each other. Enemies cannot use these mines to travel to your mine. You've then got your armory. When your armory comes off the board, it simply just gives you 1 extra power every time you take that space. It also lets you control a region without having units there. Your windmill. Windmill lets you have control of a region without having units there. It will also trigger anytime you do a produce action. So with produce actions, you can only pick 2 or 3 squares to produce, depending on your production upgrades. If you have the mill out, you will be able to do a 3rd or 4th, depending on where you're at. And then finally, the monument. Having the monument out, again, gives you control of a region, but will also let you gain an extra popularity every time you take the space that it came from. Now, popularity, very important, because it is a multiplier for how you win the game. Then we get to look at our cool little mechs. And all the mechs do have a slightly different design for the most part. I think black and yellow are basically the same. These mechs will all start on here. And as you put those mechs out, those mechs also work as upgrades, not only for your mechs, but also for your hero unit. So if you were to take this one off first, it would allow you to transfer across rivers to farms and to tundras. So that's the only way to get across rivers. So it's a pretty important one. You can either use that or you can use the mines. Other ones allow you to go to home bases that aren't being used in the game. There are 7 home bases around the game, but only 5 players. So there will always be 2 spots where you can go at least. Scout lets you use combat cards as, lets you steal a combat card from someone before you fight them. And Speed lets your mechs and hero unit go 1 extra place. So, as you can see, everything starts on your board, and as you take things off your board and add them to the main board, you get more powerful. And last but not least, now you can probably see now why I said that this game was very intimidating. The setup's easy, but it takes a little bit of time. So, you then have cubes. What game doesn't have wooden cubes? These wooden cubes go on all of the green indents on your board. So you can take an action called the upgrade action, which will allow you to take one of these off a green spot on the board, thus unlocking that added benefit every time you take that spot, and move it to a red indent on the bottom of the board, therefore making those bottom locations forever cheaper. You've also got your 6 stars. These are how you keep track of if you've finished your objectives. Once you've done 6 objectives, the game is over. You haven't necessarily won because the person with the most money is going to win, but you know, getting stars is one of the ways you get money, so it definitely helps. Last but not least, you have your workers. So all of your workers go up here on this spot. Now, as you get more workers, the cost to produce gets higher and higher. So first it costs you nothing to produce. Then after you have an additional 2 workers out, it costs you 1 power. Then after you have an additional 2 workers out, it costs you 1 power and 1 popularity. Then if you get your final 2 workers out, it costs you 1 power, 1 popularity and 1 coin. So this is how the player board looks like when it's set up. You will have 2 workers left over and your main unit. You find the spot that corresponds with your main unit. Your hero starts there. Your additional 2 workers start there. And that's how you're going to start the game. You also have to assign, this faction starts with 4 coins, and obviously they have their 2 secret objectives. That is game setup. You do that for everyone, then you get into the game. So, what we're going to do to get into the game is we're just going to take all of this off, and we're going to explain the spaces. So, each space has 2 different actions. It has a top action and a bottom action. We're just going to look at the top action here. So, the top action here, you pay 1 coin and you get to bolster. At the start of the game, you will get to draw 2 power or 1 combat card. Towards the end of the game, it'll be 3 power or 2 combat cards, plus you will get 1 popularity for taking it. The bottom action of this is at the start of the game, you will pay 3 oil to upgrade. An upgrade is when you take one of these cubes that's covering a benefit and take it down to cover a cost. Now that cube doesn't have to go in the same action space, doesn't have to be from the same action space, you just have to take 1 from the top and move it somewhere to the bottom. For this you will also get yourself 3 coins. And once you have used the enlist bottom action and taken this one off, you will get 1 power. Up here, your production, you will produce 2 goods for wherever, you will get to pick 2 locations that your farmers are on and produce goods from there. Now, looking at the board, we can see we have 2 farmers here. This farmer is on the food location, so we would take a food meeple and we would just place it on the location. Food and resources don't go into an inventory. They are always left on the field. They are controlled by whoever has a unit there. This one here is a village, so villages produce more people. So you'd be taking a person off of here, and as you can see, just taking 1 off would keep all of this locked so you don't have the new cost, and you would place them out on the board in their corresponding spots. The bottom action of this one, at the start of the game, you would be paying 3 metal, and that would let you deploy a mech, and it would let you get 2 gold as well. So just like we talked about mech, you would take one off of here, you would get the permanent upgrade for all of your mechs and your player unit, and you would place it down. This faction's third location is the move. So you would get to move at the start of the game 2 units, 1 space. You can't combine that. That's the only way you can move it. Or you would get 1 gold. The bottom action here at the start of the game, you would pay 3 wood and you would get to build. And building are these ones here. You would also get 1 coin for that. And finally, trade. As long as you're on a spot that has a town, like this, you would trade with them. So you pay 1 coin, you get 2 resources of any kind, or you could get a popularity. And the bottom action here is you would pay 4 food and you would get to enlist, which is uncovering one of these tokens, moving it up to your permanent upgrade spot. And you'll do 1. That's all you'll do. You'll be like, I'm doing this top action. If you can afford it, you will do the bottom action. Then the next person will have their turn. And you will keep doing this while you try and get those 6 stars out on the board. Now the way the 6 stars can come out on the board is if you get all 6 of your cubes moved from the top to the bottom, that is 1 star. If you get all 4 of your mechs off the board, that is 1 star. If you get all 4 buildings onto the board, that is 1 star. If you enlist all 4 of the circles, that is 1 star. If you get all 8 of your farmers out, 1 star. Do 1 secret objective, 1 star. Win 1 combat, 1 star. Win another combat, 1 star. Get to 18 popularity, 1 star. Get to 16 power, 1 star. Now you only need 6. So there are many ways to do this. Now, that is how you get stars. That is how you get resources. That is how you take turns. How do you fight? Well, fighting is interesting. So let's grab another colour out here so we can run through some scenarios, shall we? We have our nice evil white player here. So our white player has his mech right there. Now he's going to take the move action and he's going to move into here. Now only plastic figures fight, wooden figures do not fight. So this farmer is immediately going to run away back to home base. And he's going to... Now white has control of this space and any of the resources that were in this space. The flip side of that though is white is going to lose a popularity for every farmer that he sent back like that. Because obviously the peasants don't like being sent away like that. What would happen if we were set up like this? Well, sorry, like this. He would move in and we would have a fight. Now the mech itself and the hero unit don't have inherent power, but we each have 1 unit. So what we would do is we would each take these wheels, and using the power we have on the board, we would secretly set it to how much power we were prepared to spend. I have 5, so let's say I'm prepared to spend all 5. Now, because I also have 1 unit in the fight, if I have a combat card, you can see this combat card is worth 2, I could then sneakily, because this is all hidden information, sneak this 2 here, like this. And then I say I'm done, I put my stuff out, no one knows what I've played. You don't know if I've got cards in there, you don't know how much power I've used. You both flip them over, you add up whatever number is the highest, and whoever has the highest number wins and gets their combat star. If yellow wins, this guy is going to have to retreat back to his homeland, which is all the way over here. Considering you can only move 1 or 2 spaces at a time, that's quite painful. If, however, white wins, my guys move back to their home base, white would lose a popularity because he sent a farmer back. He would get his star for winning a combat, and he would now control that space and any of the resources that are inside it. This happens, you go around and around and around until someone has 6 stars, and that's the end of the game. Well, once you do the scoring. So, someone has 6 stars. What do? You come across to our end game scoring track, which is right here. So, you count how many stars someone has, and you multiply it by this number here. So, if you're down in this quadrant here, and you have 1 star, you would get 3 coins. If you're in this higher quadrant, you would get 4 coins. If you're in this higher quadrant, you would get 5 coins, and that's for each star that you have. The next one is for territory that you control. That is a times by 2, times by 3, times by 4. And you figure out which territories you control by basically which territories do you have an uncontested structure on, or farmers, or plastic. As no one can be sharing apart from structures, that's what you're under control. If you have a structure on somewhere and someone else has a figure on there, even if that figure is just a farmer, they are considered as having control of that territory. And then last but not least, each 2 resources on spaces that you control are worth either 1 coin, 2 coins, or 3 coins. So as you can see, popularity, very, very important in this game. You do not want to be sending too many farmers back to their home territory. I've now been speaking for 20 minutes. My abdomen quite hurts, so I'm going to go sit down. So Scythe just sort of makes sense. You know, you jump in, you have your little island to start with, and you're like, okay, these are the resources I can get, but I can also trade with the village to get the resources that I can't get, so I'm never stuck. It wasn't nearly as complicated as I thought it was going to be, but it was as deep as I thought it was going to be. So I was able to eke out a victory by, I think, like 2 points. And that was because I was able to push my popularity up 1 tier right at the very end, just to make sure I got the best multiplier for the 6 stars that I got. Had I have not pushed up my popularity by that 1 point, I would have actually lost the game. So the winning condition I found really interesting, that whole you got to get 6 stars, but that only triggers the end game. You still might lose. It's also very interesting that we all have the same abilities on our player boards, but our top action and our bottom action, they're not the same orientation. So one of my top actions and will have a different bottom action than your top action has. So we're never doing the exact same thing, and everything's also got a different cost as well. I realised that a little bit too late. I was like, I'm just going to get mechs. I'm just going to go out there with mechs. But I just happened to have the player board where mechs were the most expensive. So, you know, I found that really interesting. That, you know, even though we're all doing the same things and we all have the same actions, everyone's got a slightly different cost. Everyone's got a slightly different orientation of how they can do these actions. Everyone's mechs have different upgrades on them. Yeah, and that's, you know, for me, when you're in a game and you're all trying to get the same outcome, but you're all doing it slightly different ways, that's really what I enjoy when I'm playing a game. So like we said, Scythe has a lot going on. So, you know, it's quite a thick rule book. And as you're going through it, it's got everything listed. You know, you've got all the tokens that you're supposed to have. It's got right at the front important concepts. You know, it tells you like these are things you need to know, like what home base means, what control means, what resources are, what the type of units are. It gives you setup, a really detailed setup, and then it goes into you know, your top row actions and your bottom row actions. And this is the part of the game that I found the hardest to teach, the top row actions and the bottom row actions, because everyone's got a player board in front of them, and I'm like, okay, so this top row action, which is the top left for me, it's not the top left for you guys, so you have to find it. And then, you know, when everyone's new at the table, they're sort of like looking around like, what does he mean that it's not the top? I mean, which one is he talking about? And be like, okay, now the bottom row actions, they are all the same. So when I'm talking about the bottom left action, that is your bottom left as well. So that was a little confusing, but, you know, I think the interest that brings to the game, you know, it's definitely worth the little bit of confusion you have when you're trying to set it up for the first time. I did like that the game has this quick reference sheet in there. You know, it tells you, again, it's got the setup, it tells you what to do on your turn, gives you those important concepts, and then it also gives you the top row actions and the bottom row actions. Wow, it's just white. There we go. The only thing is there's only one of them. I think it would have been good, you know, it's a 5-player game, to give me 5 of those. I'm not a huge fan of getting on Board Game Geek and doing my own print-ups and all that sort of stuff. It's just not part of what I think should be my board game experience. So I'm going to give the rules a 7 out of 10. The rulebook is fine. The rulebook's good. The reference sheet is good, but it's just lazy. Just give me more. You know, give me 5 of them. I don't want to have to pass around a quick reference guide. You know, I want to be able to look at my quick reference guide. I want to be able to flip it over, look at the actions without having to ask for it, and bring it to everyone's attention that I'm looking something up, and then be like, oh, what's he doing? What's he got going on there? So we're going to give the rules a 7, just because I think only having one of these reference guides is a little lazy. And we did talk about how it is very hard to explain the top actions because everyone's top actions are in different locations. All right, now the artwork and components. I think the components are really cool. I think that mix of plastic components are for combat, wooden components are for like resource farming. I think that's really cool. It's like a cheeky little nod to the whole Eurogame and Ameritrash sort of tropes. I like that. You've got some very good art. The board's got some very good artwork on it. It does become a little difficult to read on the sides. It's like, is that a full hex or is that a half hex? I didn't have too much of an issue with it, but it was raised by a couple of people at the table, so we can't just discount that. I did have some issues. They've got these encounter cards where if you go somewhere with your faction hero, you have an encounter and you get to choose one of the 3 options. Now, I wasn't the first one there. Someone else was the first one there. And they're like, okay, I can do this, this, and this. I'm like, yeah, but what's the story? Why can you do that? And they flip the card and like, it doesn't say. It's just a picture. Now, the picture's cool, and I guess it's nice for me to be able to, you know, make up my own little story for the picture. But I would have preferred it to be sort of like Merchants of the Dark Road, where it tells you what you've come across. And then this is why you have these 3 options, because this is the scenario you've come across. I think that just would have been a nice little extra touch there. Everything, you know, everyone's got their own little individual faction hero. I think that's pretty cool. You know, artwork and components, I'd give an 8. You know, the cardboard chits, they're solid. The wooden pieces are nice. The plastic pieces are nice. There's a lot in the box. So yeah, I'd give the artwork an 8. Just would have liked, you know, a couple of little changes with the components. Would have liked those stories on those encounter cards. You know, make them feel like more of an encounter. And yeah, some of the plastic bits, like the hero I was playing, had like wings and a sword, and the sword was all droopy, and it's what you get when you get plastic pieces out of a box, right? Accessibility, I put this as a 5. I am not, this is going to be hard to wrap your head around. You know, this is not for someone just getting into the hobby. There's a lot of stuff going on. You got to worry about secret combat. You got to worry about secret combat cards. You got to worry about, you know, what we found is there were 2 people with a close to the winning score, and there were 2 people way back from the winning score. So what we found this is you need to really have that game theory brain on of, I'm doing this action here, which will let me do the top and bottom action next time, which will let me do the top and bottom action next time, which will let me only do the bottom action next time, but that will let me do the top and bottom action next time. Like, you have to be thinking like 5-6 moves ahead to really make sure that you're getting the most out of your turns, because to get 6 stars, it doesn't take that long. It's do your secret objective, win 2 combats, do a couple of upgrades, get your mechs out, you're already on 5. Like, it's not, and get your buildings out, that's 6. It's not that far away in the future. So if you're having a couple of moves where you're not getting to do much, you're pretty much out. And for someone just sort of trying to get their head around this whole area control, resource management, combat, like, it's a lot, and they're going to have a bad time. So we'll go 5 with the accessibility. And then gameplay wise, would I play this again? I'm giving this a 10 in gameplay. I would teach this. I would play this again. And I think the 3 of the 4 of us were in the same. One person at the table said I hated that game. I don't understand how they hated this game. Thought this game was great. I would have played it again immediately. And you add those numbers together, you divide it by 4, it gives you a 7.5 out of 10, which, you know, the way we score games here, a 7.5 out of 10 is a very good score. But we are looking at, you know, board games in the real world, you know. Board games, how do they work with like 4 people who play board games all the time? That's great. You know, like, oh, for gamers, this is a 10 out of 10. That's awesome. But if you only make games for gamers, then the hobby will die. So I look at this as as a global sort of thing, as like, how good is this board game, you know, with different audiences and everything like that. And, you know, that may, you know, have a little bit of contention, a little bit of disagreement. Maybe you shouldn't do that. That is why our final rating point is the gameplay one, because that lets me put my sort of gamer's perspective on it. But 7.5 out of 10, really good score. You know, I would, if you know, when I looked at this game, I was like, oh, there's miniatures on the map. It's going to be a combat game. And someone in the group chat said the same thing. And it's like, no, it's really not. So if you haven't played Scythe because you've seen those miniatures and just like, I don't want to play, you know, Risk +2, it's definitely not that. It is very, very Euro-y, and I would give it a shot if I was you.